The Thing is the most psychologically precise horror film that's ever been made. It's not the scariest, and it's not the most disturbing. It's the most precise. John Carpenter released this film to empty theaters and furious critics. They call the film cold, gratuitous, and for the next 40 years, it quietly destroyed every horror film that tried to copy it because none of them understood what they were actually copying. Now, yes, the creature effects are extraordinary. The isolation is brutal. But neither of those things explain why this film still gets under our skin in a way that almost nothing else does from 1982. The Thing works because it doesn't manufacture fear. It finds something that already exists inside of us, a documented survival response hardwired into our nervous system, and it activates it on demand. John Carpenter didn't make a scary movie. He built a psychological weapon, and most people didn't even know how it works. Most analysis of this film fall into two categories: the creature analysis, which is how does the thing work? What are its rules? Who are infected and when? These are legit questions. Smart people have spent thousands of hours mapping the infection timeline. And isolation. Antarctica as a horror setting. It's cold, the darkness, and the distance from any help that's possibly available. And believe it or not, both of those approaches are looking at the wrong thing. Because here's what I keep coming back to every time I watch this film: the monster is almost irrelevant. The creature could be replaced with almost any unverifiable threat, and the film would still function at exactly the same level. What Carpenter actually built is a machine for producing a specific psychological state in the viewer: rational distrust, social trust collapse, hypervigilance under uncertainty. These responses exist in your nervous system right now. It's not a cinematic trick, it's survival hardware. And The Thing is the only horror film that I've ever seen that knows exactly how to switch them on and refuses to switch them off until the credits are done. And that's what makes this film not only dangerous, but it makes this film perfect. Now, let's start with the single best scene in this film. And I'd argue it's probably one of the best constructed scenes in horror history.
No blood from one of you things won't obey when it's attacked. It'll try and survive. Crawl away from a hot needle, say.
MacReady has a flamethrower. Each man is tied to a bench. He cuts each one of them, drips the blood into a hot wire, and watches.
This is pure nonsense. Doesn't prove a thing.
I thought you'd feel that way, Gary. You were the only one that could have got to that blood. We'll do you last.
That scene works because Carpenter understood something fundamental about how human threat detection actually functions. In a genuine threat environment where any person could be compromised and you have no way to verify it, distrust isn't a breakdown. It isn't paranoia in the clinical sense, but it's the correct response. Psychologists call it hypervigilance, the brain's threat detection system running at max capacity. Pattern recognition is in overdrive. Every gesture, every hesitation, every glance becomes data. Watch the faces of the men in that scene. Not MacReady's, but the other men. You see men who know what looking guilty and being guilty are now identical. The test doesn't just identify the thing, it turns every innocent man into a suspect. And every one of them knows it. That's not a clever plot device. That's an accurate depiction of what rational distrust does to a group under pressure. Carpenter built a movie around that. Here's where the film makes its most ruthless move. The creature doesn't defeat these men, they defeat themselves. Watch the progression.
I know I'm human. And if you were all these things, then you'd just attack me right now. So some of you are still human.
A fundamental group, trained men with clear roles, clear hierarchy, and a clear purpose, systematically dismantles every structure that allows them to function. Gary loses command. The group fractures into factions. McCready gets locked outside, and by the third act, there is no team. There's only individuals making desperate calculations about who they can afford to trust. That deterioration follows a documented pattern in group psychology called social trust collapse. When an unverifiable infiltrator is introduced into a cooperative group, the rational response is to reduce your trust circle. But a group with zero internal trust, they can't coordinate, they can't function, and they can't survive. The thing doesn't need to infect every man on that base. It just needs to make every man suspect every other man, and then step back and let the math do the rest. Here's the verdict that I keep arriving at. The part that makes this film genuinely uncomfortable to examine is that the thing doesn't scare you. It infects you. By the time you reach that final scene, you know, the one where McCready and Childs are alone, the fire's dying. One of them is possibly not human. You're just not watching anymore. You're running probability calculations. You're reading body language. You're weighing the bottle scene, the earlier behavior, the timeline. That is your threat detection system running. It's not your critical thinking, and it's not your film analysis brain running. Carpenter built a 109-minute machine that hijacks your survival instincts and points them at a fictional scenario. And the reason why it still works is that your nervous system doesn't care whether the threat is real. Uncertainty about safety triggers the same neurological cascade regardless of the source. That's not craft, okay? That's a precise understanding of how human fear actually functions. And for 40 years, nothing else has been able to replicate it. Now, is The Thing a perfect film? No. The second act does lose some momentum. Outside McCready, Childs, and Blair, the men seem to blur together. The character differentiation is thin, and that's just a real structural weakness. And if you come to this film wanting answers, wanting to know definitively who is infected and when, you're just gonna leave frustrated. But that frustration is by design. But I understand that that's not going to work for everyone. Carpenter's ending is a deliberate act of psychological cruelty, where there is no answer. There is only two men in the cold, unable to trust each other, knowing that one of them might not be human. And if you find that ending brutal, that's exactly the point. The film isn't finished with you when the credits roll. The Thing is not the best horror film from 1982 because of its creature effects, although it's pretty good. It's not perfect because of its score, its setting, or Carpenter's direction, as extraordinary as all of those are. It's perfect because it found a weapon that every single one of us carries into the room. It found a way to activate your brain's oldest survival system, the part that's been assessing threats since long before we were born, and turn it against you for 109 minutes. Jump scares work because your nervous system reflexes. That's not a response. That's just a reflex. What Carpenter built is different. He built a machine that rational people feel genuinely uncomfortable and unsafe. And then he just refuses to let them recover until after the movie's over. And again, that's not a craft. That's just weaponized psychology. And 40 years later, nothing has been able to replicate it. But to close this out, which one do you think was human? Was it McCready? Or was it Childs? Let me know in the comments below. If you like this horror topic, then do me a favor, hit that like button. And if you're new to this channel, then do me another favor. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of my horror reviews, recommendations, and topics just like this one. So until next time, go check out my other videos. Like, subscribe, comment, all that other good stuff. But more importantly, don't get too scared. Take care, guys.